Hey there, party people. Welcome to Biscuits with Bosses by Owl Echo Entertainment. This is the podcast where we get to know leaders in the film and television industry over a spot of tea and biscuits. Now, I am your host, Kay Ross, writer, filmmaker, founder of Owl Echo Entertainment. And I gotta say, I am still learning so much about the industry, even though I've been in some version of it for the past 20 years. Now, I wanted to do this introductory episode specifically to just make sure you are aware of a couple of things. First off, this first season is entirely pre-recorded from our lives. So if you hear parts of the episode where we're responding to people in the audience, because this is a recording based on a live, just know that we are not going to be able to also respond to you live because it's already been recorded. That being said, the reason we're re-releasing this as a pre-recorded podcast is so that we can prepare for season two. And in season two, we are going to do a proper pre-recorded podcast. Super exciting. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. All right. So now that you know that the episodes you're about to hear are derived from live podcasts, please know that this is also an interview series. That is to say, even though it is conversational, we're really there to get to know our special guest of the week. So usually the process for getting to know them starts out with what I call Ted Lasso style fluff, right? So like first concert, best concert. For a few episodes, we were going through the Actually Curious deck, which provides getting to know you questions. Um, but for the most part, it's as organic as we can make it to emulate what would be a normal getting to know you conversation over coffee. And I got to tell you, coffee dates in LA and in this industry happen all the time because we want to get to know new people. We want to have, fresh perspectives added to our teams. But the only way to do that is when we have opportunity, we just kind of squeeze it in there. But the fluff isn't enough to really get the work done, right? So the next section that you'll experience as part of the Biscuits with Bosses podcast episodes is called the victory round. The victory round is really built so that each person takes a moment to celebrate something from the past week that they're really proud of. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an accolade, right? In fact, I would rather it not be an accolade because if you're waiting for some outside entity to recognize your success, then you're waiting too long. And if you wait too long, you may not have the energy to continue forward. So, the purpose of the victory round is to recognize something in the last week that you've done that aligns with your values so that when you celebrate that victory, it solidifies that foundation so that when you start to build on it, you know you're still aligned with your values. Uh, and of course, it's an exchange, right? I'm there to listen to our guests and celebrate them. And in exchange, they can help celebrate me. And hopefully, that is in fact a movement. Like, feel free to do that with your friends, with your coworkers, and even with the new people you meet. I have definitely sat around, a brunch table with people that didn't know each other at first and asked that question. Hey, so what's something from this past week that you're really proud of that you want to celebrate? Because I'm here for it, right? I want to help you celebrate. And you'd be surprised. It's a really deep icebreaker, but you'd be surprised how many people just open up, um, and are willing to reciprocate because that is part of the victory round as well. So the final section is diving deep into the industry and really talking about what are we doing as leaders, as entrepreneurs to elevate the future of filmmaking. Now, this has spanned the range, and I can't wait for you to hear all the different kinds of answers. Um, but this is an open conversation. So if our guest mentions something and it's really inspiring, please, please, please add your thoughts in the comments below. Because the whole purpose of this podcast really is to have meaningful conversations that help all of us participate both in our lives and in the industry to the fullest. I say that to say one of the reasons that one of our sponsors is Off Duty Thanks is because as much as we are getting to know each other and it's fun and we're diving deep into the work and it's meaningful, we do have to protect the boundary between the two, right? Sometimes we just want to have fun and want to spend time with friends, and that is totally okay. Sometimes we just need to get work done and we don't need to soften it with, Ted Lasso style questions, and that's okay. So hopefully part of what we are demonstrating through the podcast is, a more organic and meaningful way to have your coffee dates moving forward. But it's also a reminder that we have both sides, right? The fluff and the feel good, but also the work and the focus and the intention. Um, and they don't have to be in the same conversation. We just like to do it on ours. Now, that all being said, yes, I have been in the industry for over 20 years now. I started doing professional theater straight out of high school. I did take some time to make my money back. I was a professional massage therapist for 14 years. It's actually what paid my way through film school. I went to Colorado Film School, graduated from Regis University as part of their transfer program. And shortly after graduating, I actually started my first staff position with a media company in Washington, D.C. for true crime docuseries, which, clearly is a very popular thing. Even in DC, like the Discovery Channel or the Reels channel, there's a lot of docu work that is available to people in the industry in DC. And to that I say, go with God. Have a great time. Um, the irony of all of that situation was one, I steered away from theater so I would stop being groomed as a stage manager because I had an aptitude for it. And then I was being groomed as a production manager when I got into film. And I was like, how did I get back here? And then I was also training to be a police officer. It's why I did martial arts all through high school and into college. Um, because I thought I was going to be in law enforcement. And here I am still looking at crime scene photos, even though I've left the law enforcement industry. And I just thought, nope, I somehow circled right back around to the same kind of work I was trying to avoid. Um, and even when I went to film school, originally I had interviewed for Naropa University, and I remember being in the interview with the counselor, and he's looking at oh, I see contemplative psychology is what you're interested in. Does this mean you want to be a therapist or a counselor? And I was like, oh no, dude, like I'm a massage therapist, I already know how to listen. I am in fact very good at listening, and I don't need a certificate that tells me I know how to listen. I said, in fact, I think I have something to say. And we both kind of sat there, beautiful little pregnant pause. And it dawned on me, one, I am not spending private school money on an education that I don't really believe in. And two, even if I move forward with this plan, how do I work full time and afford private school and still make films, which I had started like through 48-hour film festivals. I had already started making short films. And that's when I discovered Colorado Film School, and it was half the price. I could pay it out of pocket. And I was like, and I'm okay with getting this degree because in my mind, worst case scenario, I still have a day job that I can grow in. And best case scenario, like I get to finally do the work that I've always dreamed of. Um, anyway, so I say that to say, breaking away from the opportunities that were afforded me based on where I was born is definitely part of my trajectory. And part of the learning curve of living in Los Angeles has been, how do I show up for other people? And then when other people show up for me, how do I make the most of their time and effort? Because the truth is, the reason there's a Burbank Shuffle in Los Angeles, for those of you who don't know the Burbank Shuffle, it's when you make contact with somebody and there's an assumption that there's going to be a follow-up, and then there's nothing. and then there's nothing, and then there's nothing. And it's possible you'll talk to that person like once a year. In fact, that's probably a good check-in if you haven't talked to somebody in a minute. Just be like, "Hi, I remember talking to you last year. I hope you're doing well." Totally fine. People get that all the time. But people will just peace out and never talk to you again, and you don't know why. Burbank Shuffle. um, but in preparation for the Burbank Shuffle, part of what you have to recognize is it is possible you will have a perfectly pleasant relationship with somebody, and it will begin and end over one coffee date. Um, and so any time or effort that people afford you, you know, be as grateful as you can be because really it is a gift. It is a gift. Um, and so you can imagine people coming on the podcast and giving an hour of their time to give to so many people is such a gift. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to create the podcast is so that, I feel a little selfish just having that conversation, just me and that other person, and I'm the only one that gets to benefit from it. Like, there's such good information that can be exchanged between two people over coffee. And it's just such a shame that it stays insular when it's just those two people. So I say that all to say part of the reason for the podcast is so that I can continue to learn and grow on my journey to becoming a writer and director. In fact, this next year, I am hoping to move forward with my directorial debut as a feature film director. But more on that soon. The other reason, of course, for the podcast is so other people like yourself can learn from these amazing individuals that are doing some really great work, even if they're not headlining, right? So even if they're not A-listers, they're still bosses in the industry and they're doing some amazing work. And we can all learn a little thing from each of them. All right. Thank you for listening. I know I've been rambling for a minute. Um, but I hope you enjoy this first season of Biscuits with Bosses, and I'll see you in the comments. Bye, y'all.